You're going to be more distinct, more regular, and slower. My God, you're not going to do anything. You have no choice. You want to be this way. And you better examine your activities to be sure you're that way. Just invert the argument and begin to see the beauty of it when you invert it. Because that's going to permit you to do these things. As a matter of fact, those kinds of things permit you to get inside his OODA loops. Or get inside his mind kind of space. In other words, penetrate his moral, mental, physical being. You're going to get right inside his system. You got it. And if you start holding rigid ideas, rigid ways of operating, you're not going to get that opportunity. The mere fact that you want to look at your adversary's philosophy, you want to understand the way he operates, that doesn't mean you have to, but you have to understand it from his viewpoint. Motion. Because then that will give the opportunity to study. And of course then you see the underlying idea. Of course, not only does Sun Tzu imply that, fully recognize it. When you look at those resource infiltration techniques, at least in the physical sense. As a matter of fact, for you people who read Little Heart, it's going to be a much better book. Little Heart's thing, I think it's a lot of garbage, you know. Glad to explain why I have. It doesn't really come to grips with it. Read Fuller's book, The Conduct of War from 1789-1961. Very nice stuff there. Politically so, too, for your people. Very nice stuff. Very introspective stuff. Really look into it. How many people read Little Heart's Strategy Indirect Approach? Remember we talked about the indirect approach as being a dislocation being an indirect approach. My God, he's got circular reasoning. He's going to dislocate a guy's mind. You don't dislocate a mind, you disorient. Talks about dislocation, wedges, lines. He's a chiropractor at war. You know, you have to understand the fact that the way he uses words, as you can tell, he doesn't understand it. You don't dislocate a mind. You start thinking about disorientation. What kinds of things is that? How do you do that? He didn't even come to grips with that. He might not say it that way, but you see that kind of stuff in there. Okay, that's why I think it's an important thing to do. In any case, I finally got there. Some people want to know when we're going to look at it the other way. So, it raises these questions naturally since we've gone all one way. How can we counter what's likewise the road movement? So let's look into it. Now remember earlier we showed a chart and talked about this kind of phenomenon. In fact, on one hand, you know, you're trying to be irregular. On the other hand, you're trying to go deep. You're trying to adapt. And we made a point similar to this. It was difficult to sustain fast tempo. You're forced to do all the shifting and also trying to go deep. That's correct. And that is a vulnerability that lets you want to play upon that. So let's look at a counterplay. So one chart snapshot. I'll let you read it and I'll comment. And I want to see if there's a certain view that comes out of it after you read it. Some people pick it up. You probably all do. Some people are able to maybe just say it more directly too. But there's a notion I want to drive home here after you read it too. Key idea up here. Think of areas, regions, and zones. Remember, terrain doesn't wage war with machine guns. You don't try to defend terrain, you use the terrain as what? A medium for maneuver. You try to set yourself to do that. You have your intelligence, operation, note here, deploy, disperse, and language disperse. Remember, you have to do that. After you set up one way, you keep setting up that same way, or set up a certain way, you keep it that way, pretty soon, enemy intelligence, direct the activity, you can discern what you're up to. So you want to change those deployment dispersal routines as long as you can still form your own local main effort, because you're feeding them a basketball of fog all the time. In other words, race is uncertainty. And that's how you do it. Like the Army says, you want to deprive your adversary of the opportunity to sand table. In other words, if you're sitting in the same position, pretty soon they lay out sand tables, lay out all kinds of delicate attacks trying to get in your system. But if you keep changing it, Christ, they're never going to lay out the sand table. So they lay out a nice articulated attack against you because you're very amorphous, you're very uncertain, they just can't get a good image or picture of what you're up to. And third, your reserve. And it raises an important question. What the hell do you want reserves for? Clausewitz said it very well. 2 out of the 3. 2. 1, it's a hedge against what? Uncertainty. You don't know exactly what's going to happen, so you need uncertainty in order to deal or adjust to unforeseen circumstances. That's one reason. Another reason, by having reserves, you also keep the operation going. In other words, you don't get all tired out and wear your people out. You put reserves up and bring the other guys back into reserves, so you can maintain the tempo or sustain operation. And there's a third reason. You also, since you have the reserves, your adversary doesn't know how you're going to use it, you build uncertainty in his camp. So he can't cope. He doesn't know how you're going to use it. So then, your action. You want to begin the erosion action and also, on him at the same time, the first bullet here, try to get an image or a picture of what he's up to. Don't step in here and take him on right away. I see it too often in the Pentagon. We do certain things to him, like you probably already know him, associated with the reform movement. We do certain things to them, and Christ, they react right away, we cut them up. If they were smart, they'd try to step back and try to suck us in. If you react too fast tactically, you may lose a fantastic strategic opportunity. Sometimes you want to give tactically so you get a big strategic grab. In any case, you get that picture. Remember, we're not trying to defend the terrain, we use the medium for maneuver. Then with that information, you can start allocating your people, start feeding them into those sectors that lie adjacent to the oncoming thrust. In other words, you can dig locally into their flanks and rear, cut off their supply efforts, etc. That doesn't mean you'll make it, because they know probably you're going to do some of that stuff, so they'll put out flank guards. Particularly, there are a lot of troops coming through there, and they may stop you. But then you have these reserves back there, you can swing in a deep flank counterstroke and roll up. So you, while they're hitting you with many happenings, you can hit them with many counter happenings. Roll up and clear. The idea is very simple. What does all this suggest? Anybody? Let me make that statement. What does it all suggest?
Like you outflip the flip.
Say it. What you do, it's a reverse flip. And in a sense, you have an advantage. Remember, he's coming into your territory. You know it better. All you got to do is just don't lose your nerve. And don't worry about defending the terrain. Use the terrain as a medium for maneuver so you take out his force. You know it better. But if you say, God, I'm going to defend this foot of ground, you're playing it right. Now, there might be some areas you have to defend. He's a fighter pilot. I can't step out and capture that cloud. My whole world's a whirl of maneuvering. If I don't do it right, I'm going to get taken out. That's why when I first got into stuff, I said, what are these ground people? They're all getting attached to that piece of ground. What the hell with it? Let it go and take them out. Then I started reading about all these German Blitzkommando and other people. That's what they're doing. It seems to work. Why don't we do that? You can't get too attached. They think, well, we're moving backwards. Well, we're on the defense. But no, as long as you have the initiative. I don't care if you move backwards, forwards, sideways, or any other direction. You have to use that terrain so you can take out the force, then you get it all back. There's many successful people who have done that. In fact, Manstein was one of the successful practitioners of that. Go ahead.
What would you label terrain in political context? What would you label the terrain in political context?
Well, you're talking about the population or people out there. That's the terrain you're going to be working with. And your adversary may be doing certain things in there, and you might think it's a success, but as long as you know there's a horrible contradiction there, and you lead him in there, you want to get him in deep, because if he only does a little bit, and you move back, then he makes the adjustment. If you get him in deep and can't make the adjustment, then he discredits himself. I mean, it's down the tube. See, because I've seen people do it. I've even seen some of the TV programs, the guy will make a mistake, and I said, God, you got to really drag him in deep now, and the guy makes a comeback, and the guy gets out of it. No, suck him in, reinforce, let him get in real deep, and then, there's no way out. He's emphasizing. come back too soon. You want to, when you see it, say, hey, I got to get this guy in deeper. He loves it. I got to feed him some more success. Would you give him a tactical success for a strategic disaster? You want to start, you got to think about that. Remember, you got to, when you do it, Pete, you got to think it through. You know there's a paradox here and you leverage it. Got that paradox.